Hi, Robin.
Hi, Emma.
Can you introduce yourself to all these lovely people?
Sure. Robin Russell, CEO of Satva Trust.
So, I was reminded to tiny mic you when you started talking about the EU Data Act a
Mm.
couple minutes ago.
Mm.
So, it came up this week, actually.
Mm. It did. It did indeed. Yeah, a little bit of a geek topic, and seems like it's around the edges of the shipping world. This was the first time that it had come up, to my knowledge, recently in this sort of area. But at the Inmarsat panel, talking about data sharing, which is one of my loves in life, somebody asked a question about the EU Data Act, and I have to say that the panel, to a person, admitted that they had no view, that they had no awareness of the EU Data Act. So I put my hand up and I spoke a little bit to the room.
It's good because I can see how happy you are about this because we just spent a fair amount of time geeking out about that before we had determined that it didn't have relevance to shipping, or so we thought. What was the surprise that came actually
Yeah.
from? You had a conversation.
Yeah. No. No.
With a
Exactly.
lawyer?
Yeah. No. No. Exactly. So. Essentially, the background is that the act, as we looked into it and as we spent time, that the act is very exciting for anybody who wants data out there and usable, until you start looking into it in more detail. At which point, it seems as if it's not relevant really for shipping, because it only touches on situations that are directly linked to the EU in a way which is unhelpful for shipping. So then, fast forward a couple of days, I was at another event with Thetius and DAC Beechcroft, and I had a very interesting conversation with one of the lawyers there about the EU Data Act. And apparently, there's been some OEMs who've been spending a lot of time fretting about the EU Data Act, and about their exposure in that direction and how they're going to sort things out so that they can comply. I think there's more wiggle room than we'd given it credit for, and I think it's something that we should perhaps spend a little bit more time thinking about. It's pretty interesting.
You mean you and I, or everybody watching this?
Both, both, absolutely. You and I, but then anybody that wants to talk about it. It is an interesting topic. It has the potential to crack open the raw data flow from all the equipment on board ships, to make it available to the world in interesting ways. So it's a pretty important topic.
If it did impact shipping, what are the first things that would change?
I think the what I'd like to see it change, whether or not this would come through, what I'd like to see it change is the attitude that the shipping industry has towards data, which is one of, first of all, protectionism. It's my data, not yours. I need to be paid for it. It has some inherent intrinsic value. I think all of those are misconceptions. The value in data is only when you use it, only when you aggregate it. That's one thing. I think it is valuable to whoever uses it. It's not valuable to whoever holds it. So if you are part of the value chain when it is used, then that's great. Otherwise, it's worthless. In fact, it costs you because you have to store it. And then the other thing, which maybe we'll get to later, actually, that's another topic on the absolute versus relative, but that's another topic. I think for me, we have to get beyond a centralized prescriptive view of what data can do in the world to one which is driven by markets.
What is one thing that you wish people asked you more about that they almost never do?
Ooh.
I ask you about everything, so you can't.
This is great. So and it leads on so beautifully. The world of shipping is run on absolute lines. So if you think about CII, if you think about EU ETS, if you think about if you think about Fuel EU, to some decent degree at least, all of those things, EEXI, they're all prescriptive. They're all absolute. Here's the number, and that's your target. And yeah, they change over time, but there's a target. And the problem with that is, first of all, people go for the target and no further, so you don't get things speeding up. And the second thing is, you get all sorts of arguments about what the numbers should be and what they mean, which completely distracts from efforts to actually do better. This brings me back to the data side of things as well. From my perspective, the world should be relative, and the job of the IMO, the job of regulatory bodies everywhere, actually, but just to keep it to the shipping world, the job of the IMO should be to set to be prescriptive about the way relative positions are treated. So I think it would be constructive, I think it would be helpful for the IMO to say something like the top 10% of performers in the world's fleet in this filtered description should have these costs. Yeah, they should they should have to give up 30% of their emissions in relation to the EU ETS forever. And then the next 30% should have to give up 70% of their emissions, forever. And then, everybody else should have to give up 100% of their emissions, or something like that, or even maybe a granular sliding scale. The reason they should do that is because then there's a financial incentive to do better. And it's not to do better to a particular prescribed figure that some person has dreamed up. It's relative to their peers. It's competition. And so suddenly you get a situation where the market is in the room, and everybody has a reason to do a little bit better than the people next door. And so the whole industry gradually becomes better of its own. Not because you've legislated, not because you've sort of put some step function involved, but just because you've said, hey, the way you act means that you get paid in different ways, so that you have different bills to pay or whatever it is. And the world needs a lot more of that type of treatment.